everyone. This is Larry Stebbins, the Garden Father. I'll be doing a series of podcasts throughout the season, and you'll be hearing about my tips and suggestions and things that I learn along the way. This is episode 5, Soil Health and Composting. Now, for some of you, you may want to learn how to compost, and for the next few minutes I will be discussing a quick and easy way to compost that I think will bring you much success. I'll go into more detail as this discussion progresses. But what's more important is some information I've come across that finally it kind of settled into me. The relationship between plants and the soil microbes that just kind of took my breath away. And we'll get into that after we talk about compost for you. Now, I've said this before, the best thing you can do for your soils is use your own homemade compost. Now, it's pretty simple. I'll go into more details later, but I just want to go over the quick and easy way to do something with this. Now, you're going to need a compost bin or something to hold your compost that is at least 3 to 4 feet wide and at least 3 to 4 feet high. One simple way that doesn't cost too much money is go to the hardware store and get yourself a 10 to 12 foot piece of 3 foot to 4 foot high, 2 inch by 4 inch welded wire that you can just make into a cylinder. Tie it together using zip ties, and you're ready to begin filling it. Or you could spend a little more money and buy some, professionally made compost bins. They'll run anywhere between, $50 on up to $300 and $400, so depending on your budget. They all work. Some just work a little easier than others. All right, now here's the method I use. It's called the 31-31 method. And that stands for 3 inches, 1 inch, 3 inches, 1 inch, and repeat. Now let me go over the layers. The first layer you're going to use is a 3-inch layer of old straw or other brown material like straw with ground up leaves, tree leaves mixed, that can be in that first layer. I like straw because it's readily available and it works well in my compost bin. Then I add 1 inch of either some of the old compost that I've had laying around or some of my native soil that's around my yard or in my garden. Or you could possibly add even 1 inch of some organically fed manures, such as cow, sheep, or horse, as long as they've been fed organic material, and stay away from those that have not, because their manures could harbor some things in there that may be undesirable to your plants. And then you follow that with a 3-inch layer of kitchen scraps, or what we call greens. Now, the more you chop them up, the faster you're going to get finished compost. But you can just add them as they come out of the kitchen. Things like greens for salads and fruits and that sort of thing. Banana peels, coffee grounds work well in moderation. All of that in that layer. You can even add things like alfalfa pellets, which basically is just rabbit food that you can get at your local feed store. I avoid getting alfalfa pellets from like Walmart or some of the big box stores because it has other things in it, like wheat midlands and vitamins and minerals that I don't want to add to the soil. So go to a feed store and get just pure alfalfa pellets. That can be added as greens. You put them in a bucket, soak it with water until it turns into a mush, add it to your pile, and that can also assist in the greens, and boy, that'll really work for you well. So, followed by 1 inch again of that your little bit of compost, native soil around your area, or and with some animal manures. Now, most importantly, that 1-inch layer should contain some local soil from your yard, and we'll go into that in a little bit. Now, you want to keep that pull pile as moist as a wrung-out sponge. Keep layering it up until it gets 3 to 4 feet high, and then you're done with that pile, and it's basically built. Now, what I like to do is I like to turn it quite frequently to make sure that it stays moist throughout. And some people recommend waiting about a month and then turning it, which is what I used to do. Now I find out that if I turn it about 3 or 4 times in the first 2 weeks and then let it set for 2 weeks and turn it again, I can get the pile thoroughly mixed, and then it will start to what we call cook. Which means the biological activity will be increasing and the temperatures will go up between 130 and 150 degrees Fahrenheit, and it'll stay that way for about 2 weeks hopefully, and that will help break down a lot of the materials and kill some of the pathogens that might be in the soil if there are any. And you let that sit then again for about 2 or 3 months until you have a finished compost pile. And that's really it for composting, and you continue that throughout the season, and you can add it any time of the year to your garden beds. I like to add mine in the fall, a little bit in the spring, and then during the season add a handful here or there around some of my plants as they grow. But it is the best thing you can add to your soil for a number of reasons which we will discuss. Now let's talk about healthy soils and why the soil organisms are so important to the plants and for the soil health of all things growing in it. Now, I've talked a lot about the microbes in the soil and how important they are because they help break down the organic material and make them useful for the plants. But one thing that I really didn't realize is the interconnectedness between the plant, trees, shrubs, vegetables, and the soil organisms. Now, there's a lot of research being done on this, and it's much more than I ever expected. But it's a two-way street. I found out that the plants are actually farming the microorganisms. Now, stay with me for a second here. You know, I'm trying to see how this all wraps together, and when I finally took a look at it, it made some sense, and it quite frankly amazed me that the plants are actually helping to grow the microorganisms in the soil. There's a thing called plant exudates. That means what leaves the plant. And of course, above the soil, we've got that pretty much well documented, carbon dioxide, oxygen exchange, all of that. And there are some volatile parts of the plant that as it decays after it dies, it releases itself into the atmosphere. But one thing that I wasn't clear on and really hadn't studied much was what the plants exude from their roots. Now, there are some studies being done, and probably one of the lead scientists working in this area is Dr. Elaine Ingham. And she's been associated with the Rodale Institute. She also worked and did some publishing for the USDA Soil Biology Primer, which she put out. She actually graduated from Colorado State University. And her thing is called the soil food web. And she's been studying this for about 30 years or more. And she has colleagues all around the world that are also studying this. Yes, there are scientists all over the world that have been studying this soil food web and seeing about what exactly is going on here. From the University of Sydney, from Cambridge, University of Vienna, and the Rodale Institute endorses this information. So again, the research is showing that the plants actually excrete things through the roots that allow microbes, which are the protozoans, the bacteria, and the fungi to grow, that help digest the food all around in the organic material so that that plant can use just what it needs from the soil. Now, this is kind of amazing. This means the plants are active participants in helping things underneath the soil grow. I mean, when you think about it, of course they don't do it consciously. That would be a far stretch. But what they do is they're out of their root structure is coming these things like organic acids, which are things like fumaric, lactic, tartaric, oxalic acid, citric acid, and others, and enzymes such as amylases and invertases and phosphatases, and proteases, which help break down the material in the soil just in the way that the plant itself can use it. So what they're doing is actually microfarming the area in which they grow so that they can grow better. Now, when you think about this I always understood the idea of the microbes in the soil helping break down food so the plant can use it. But thinking that the plant actually participates in helping excrete things through its roots to help it grow better by allowing those things to grow better in the soil for its own benefit is something that just hit me like a brick, saying, this is incredible. It's an amazing thing for me to see. Now, I know I may be late coming to the table on this, and some of you have already been there or done that and said, yeah, I knew about that. But for me, it was that aha moment that got me to say the plants are actually participating in their own health. Now, something else that is kind of incredible is different parts of the world with different soils have different microbes. And these microbes are assisted to grow by the plants growing in that region, and only in that region perhaps, so that they benefit that plant species. Now, some of you may wonder, you say, well, just like your own gut biome may have different bacteria growing in your gut than maybe places around the world, such as in India or in Southeast Asia, where their gut biome may be different, but it is perfect for them if it's in balance to their area, the food they eat, their genetics, and so on. And so to think that plants also behave similarly, now not on a conscious level again, I'm sure, but they do that by exudating material that helps those fungi and bacteria and so on in the soil for that region, help nurture it so it can grow, so that plant that is suited for that region and that soil can grow better. Okay, so what does that mean for us? Well, for me, it has changed the way that I look at the soil. I just don't want any microbes in there. I want local microbes in there. Now, I used to just use the shotgun approach. I would add a mix from the garden centers of an organic fertilizer that had a whole host of bacteria, beneficial bacteria and beneficial mycorrhizal fungi. But I want to look at it differently now, knowing that instead of that shotgun approach, maybe I need to cultivate my own local bacteria and mycorrhizal fungi to be used in my garden instead of something that's been imported into it from outside, from who knows where. Okay, that's where your own homemade compost comes in. As you make your compost and you add the local native soil, some of your own garden bed soil perhaps, and even some of your own homemade compost that you've made in the past, you will be keeping that local flora and fauna in the soil alive and well. And now you have to nurture it to make sure that it does well in the compost pile and once you add it to your garden beds. Okay, that's where careful monitoring of your compost pile comes in. Now I'm going to use two terms here. One is aerobic, means in the presence of oxygen, and the other is anaerobic, means the absence of oxygen. You want your compost pile to be aerobic, to be filled with oxygen from the top to the bottom and into the center. Now how do you do that? Well, one is by turning it frequently. That helps. Another method is when I make a circular compost bin, such as I've shown you or discussed in the past, you take a large pipe, maybe a 4-inch diameter pipe with holes in it, and I usually get a large white PVC pipe, it's a little bit taller than my compost pile, and I put that in the center. But before I do, I drill holes in it. 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch, but bigger the holes, the better. And I just sink that down into the middle and add my compost pile around it. That way oxygen will be able to come into the center of the pile a little easier. This helps. The correct amount of moisture helps. Again, as moist as a wrung-out sponge from edge to edge and all the way through the center. If your compost pile is too moist, in other words soggy, you'll create what's called an anaerobic condition. There'll be different bacteria that will be growing in there. Your pile will probably get a little smelly, sometimes quite a bit smelly, and those kinds of bacteria and things are not healthy for your plant community when you add it to the soil. That is not what your plant needs. Remember, plants need oxygen on the top where their leaves are and in the soil all the way throughout. That is very important. So your compost should be just the same. Now let's talk a little bit about the difference between thermal composting and cold composting. Now most people, when they think of composting, they think of once they add the layers to their to their compost pile, that it will eventually heat up and that temperature will be somewhere between 130 and 150 degrees and stay at that temperature for hopefully about a week or two. And that will assist in the decomposition of the vegetable plant matter and manures and turn it into usable soiled compost-looking material. However, some of us build our compost piles a little at a time. That we add a little bit here, a little bit there, and finally, the layers get built up. And, it really doesn't have a chance to heat up as well as it does as if you built it all at one time with those layers and then let it sit. Well, don't be dismayed. You're still going to get compost. It's going to be okay. It's going to be good, perhaps, but it's not going to be as good as if it was thermally constructed all at one time. Now, this is hard to do. But another method you could use is the tumbler method. You can buy these through the catalogs or at your local nurseries, and they're large compost bins that are, like a barrel on its side with doors on the side, and you add your compost there, and you can use a crank on the side to help crank and turn it, and you're constantly aerating that mix. And yes, you can get compost quite a bit quicker using this method. Now, another thing people have asked is, does it matter if I put my compost bin in the sun or shade? It doesn't matter a whole lot, but you will get faster compost if the compost bin itself is a little warmer. Obviously, if it's in a shady area during the winter, if it's moist, it'll probably freeze solid. So, there'll be lesser of a bacterial and fungal operation going on. Ideally, I like my compost piles to be in the shade in the summer and to be in the sun in the winter. But, choose a spot that is good for you, and you'll get compost. Maybe a little slower if it's in a cold, shady area than if it was in a warm, sunny spot. Well, I hope some of this information helps. It certainly is interesting to me to see the relationship in the active participation of plants, shrubs, and trees in helping farm, so to speak, and grow healthy microbes in the soil. So the best thing we all can do is to make sure that we have the material, the ground floor for those plants to succeed, which means our own local homemade compost, means keeping our soils fertile by adding that to the soils on a regular basis so the plants can use them. And you'll not only have healthier plants, better fruit production and better leafy production, but like I've said before, health also means resistance from bugs and other diseases, and that you will get. So, if you understand this a little bit, it all makes sense. Healthy soils, healthy plants, and then the plants will help make that and maintain that soil health as long as you give them a little help yourself. So this is Larry signing off for now. Happy gardening.